Today I wanted to talk about the lessons of difficulties, which there are infinite of. Infinite lessons and infinite difficulties as we see in this universe. So recently I've been noticing a lot of these difficult lessons in my life and especially in the lives of a lot of people around me, and it makes me reflect on who I am, the choices I've made, where I've been and where I'm going, and how my past defines me at one stage and completely doesn't define me in other stages. It's a place to visit and to reflect on and never to completely forget, but it's not a place to live from. I'm learning to live from the present, live from my current understanding of where I'm going and what I need to do and the responsibilities that I want to and need to lift up, and the areas where I need to relax a bit and just see how powerful letting go can be. Because I have a tendency to try to control things. I also have a tendency to be a tyrant over myself, a slave driver over myself, and then of course that other aspect of myself that is being attacked by myself tends to rebel. And so therefore, when we act like that, we're really not a united front. So I'm learning to be kind to myself and compassionate, but also not to let myself get away with things. So it's also about accountability, that so much of our current narrative on dealing with yourself and your inner critic is just about complete acceptance and just saying, oh, you're completely okay how you are. You shouldn't be down on yourself. And of course there's some truth to that, but there's also the side of things where sometimes we do need to be down on ourselves and criticize ourselves, but only when it's a positive thing, not when we're just trying to hurt ourselves and be a slave driver and turn ourselves into a pawn of our own desires and even society's desires. So I think what we're all seeking for is inner peace and outer meaning, that we're searching to make our lives meaningful in a deeper way, but also to be okay with things and to accept things. And sometimes those two drives are at odds with each other. And sometimes we can take our inner drives and project them on the outer universe. And a lot of times that falls flat on its face and it just doesn't work, and we presume to know the answers, or we just decide not to ask the questions and remain confused. And both of these things fall into the category of delusion, believing in these illusions. And so much of this struggle forward, we end up falling into a victim mentality and just sitting and treading water, eventually falling under and then struggling back up and just living in a constant struggle. And that's one place that I've lived a huge chunk of my life, is just ground and grinding into this constant struggle. And recently I've had a lot of time to sit back and reflect on things, and even that's addictive in its own way. And of course, as the Buddha talked about, it's always the middle path in between these extremes, because a lot of us have a tendency to fall into these extremes. And they're really like ravines and ditches that we fall into, because there's a part of us that doesn't want to grow, and we can't force that part to grow. We can negotiate with it and even on some level convince it to become unstuck, because if we don't negotiate with these parts of ourselves, the universe is going to come along and there is going to be consequences to our actions and to this inner energy that we cultivate. And I've seen that happen with myself, and as I go down that path and on some level confront those inner demons and those lies, it seems that the challenges grow more and more subtle in some areas, but also more and more intense in other areas. It seems like it's irradiating or burning out some of these dead parts so that the growth can take place. It's the growing pains, and it can be very, very painful at some points, but also can be very liberating. And so it's focusing on that it's not just all good and it's not just all bad, that these extreme black and white methods of thinking just really have us faltering and have us falling again into these cataclysms and all of these disaster-based thinking. And it's like, one deep lesson that I've learned is if you live your life in a disaster, then it's a lot harder to confront what actually matters. And I think that's one reason that a lot of us tend to throw ourselves into these disastrous situations, because if you have an outer disaster manifested, then you don't have to confront your inner disaster and all of these parts of your personality that are at odds with themselves, because then you have this outer demon to fight, the challenger that's an external one, when really it's like we keep on seeing this message in our culture and our spiritualities, religions, everywhere, the mythology of there is outer challenges. Of course, there always will be on some level, but really the place to look is the inner, and where your own choices and habits and responsibilities lie, and where you can understand a way forward by making friends with yourself and not being at odds with yourself, and just cultivating that self-love. And it is a cliche, and sometimes that self-love can even be corrupted and can end with these difficult scenarios where we become isolated or become isolated within ourselves as addictions. So those are just some thoughts that I've been having just right now, just reflecting on them. And just as a goal, I want to be more honest with myself, and I want to have less reactions. And that's constantly where I'm slipping up, and I see a lot of people in my life slipping up because there's a stimulus and a reaction, and then we're trying to find that sweet spot in between the stimulus and reaction where we can stop that reaction from happening. And that in that sweet spot, it is very uncomfortable sometimes to just sit there with that difficulty and that darkness and not go into self-pity and not go into a place of attacking. So it's like in between the self-pity and the outer projection is this sweet spot, and it's like a black hole where it can just twirl for a while, and then in the eye of the storm you can find the way out.